the system.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to another episode of Saturday afternoon's main event. Of course, you know who this is. It's right down there. It is the phenomenal one. Of course, back at it again to go ahead and kick off S.A.M.E episode 14. And right by his side, of course, is his co-host, the limousine riding, jet flying, kiss stealing, wheeling dealing son of a gun, who is not having a hard time holding his alligators down. It is the one, the only, Mr. Peeps. Nate Peeps!
Woo! Yes.
Let him know.
The dark is here, so to speak. Yes.
Sean Black himself.
Was in the house. Go figure.
Exactly. Come on now. But yes, Peeps Nation, the phenomenal one. We're here, Saturday afternoon's main event, episode 14, to go ahead and give to you guys, the fans of professional wrestling, laughs, good times, and all the pro wrestling news possible. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this started with, of course, Saturday afternoon's very one and only Fast Track. Number one, Hook. Man, Peeps, Hook himself has made his debut in All Elite Wrestling. What do you have to say about this? I mean, you were there, for God's sakes. Peeps, how was this?
First and foremost, I have to say, most people that are looking are wondering, okay, you've seen Hook as part of Team Taz. You've seen him interject himself a couple times here and there. Hook is good. I am very impressed with what I saw with Hook. His physique, although he's a tall, thin-framed guy, he's got a pretty decent physique on him. And I think that if you see him maybe fill himself out a little more as he gets a little older and continue to grow into his body, he's going to be a solid guy. But what I saw is the perfect opponent was Fuego del Sol.
Yes.
Now, when they had this match at Rampage and the fans were really, not only were the fans into it, it was a strong Long Island crowd that Hook was having a title match. That's how loud it was. And anytime Fuego got any kind of offense in, they booed vociferously. So they had no qualms in letting Fuego know, we may like you, but not today. And that's exactly what happened. And I think Hook has a ground-based mat game with a lot of submission style that obviously he picked up from his father Taz.
Oh, yes.
You can see in him some parts of, when he looks at the camera, the face, the smugness.
Yes, sir.
You can see even by the way he chews his gum that he is definitely Taz's son. So I think that connection is there. The match was really good for a debut match as far as him having a singles debut. I was impressed. I really thoroughly enjoyed what I saw. I enjoyed the match, and I went with two friends of mine that were there, and they were impressed as well.
I don't blame him. I do not blame him because wow. Hook himself, I mean, we've all been anticipating this, right? I don't think we haven't. So it's like to go ahead and see what he has done. Oh yeah, it's really big. It's really big. But I mean, shout out to Hook for that one. Hope to see a lot of good things come from him as a young guy at All Elite Wrestling. Team Taz really has a dub in this one, and that's what I believe for certainly.
Yes.
Next one itself. Number 2, Tony Khan to be lending support to Ring of Honor for its final show, known to many as Final Battle. One of those names being Jay Lethal and many others to come. Peeps, what do you think about this move from Tony Khan?
I have no issue with it. First of all, we didn't really expect Final Battle to actually be Ring of Honor's Final Battle. I mean, they took it quite literally with this. It's sad to know that Ring of Honor right now, as we know it, is going to change forever. Potentially, we don't know exactly funding wise what's going to happen. We know they're going to take a sabbatical off. They'll be back, they hope, by April. So they're trying to go through the first fiscal year to reorganize the company, get their finances in order, figure out the model for what they're going to do, and then potentially try and sign other people, try a different business model. But Tony Khan is doing a great solid for the business in the sense that you're going to have a business that can only thrive with more companies out there, with more promotions. Yes. When WWE, at the time WWF, bought WCW, most people looked at, well, okay, at least they bought the companies out, they bought their competition, but we all know competition creates intrigue and it helps the product get better. Yeah. If you only have one cell phone company making cell phones, there's no innovation, so things get stagnant. Same thing in any business. You got to have competition, and I think helping them out in the long run may potentially do well, and I'm actually applauding Tony Khan.
Likewise here. So let's just see how Final Battle reels out to the end. I will certainly be tuning in. I know you will be, peeps, and so many other fans itself. But next in news, looks like Vincent Kennedy McMahon and World Wrestling Entertainment are in for a little bit of straightening, if you know what I mean. The Migos are set to make an appearance at the next WWE pay-per-view, known to many as Day One, in Atlanta, Georgia, at the State Farm Arena. Why, should you may ask? I think that it's just to go ahead and have another celebrity, and ambiance just to it, because I guess they're just lacking pay-per-view buys and just views. What do you think about this, peeps?
Well, the music industry has always had a connection within wrestling, especially in the South, in Atlanta, certain parts of Louisiana, Florida. We know that a lot of acts and music acts, especially hip-hop and rap artists, love wrestling. So why not put Migos in there? We had Bad Bunny at WrestleMania. We've had many other artists in wrestling. Even years ago, Salt and Pepper were at a WCW event. So that's going back some time. Yeah. So hip-hop, any kind of celebrity status knows works and gets a certain amount of media attention for their pay-per-views, for their product. So we know that that's one of the things that they're looking forward to. I think also it's supposed to maybe help ticket sales, because I don't know what the ticket sales are officially for Day One in Atlanta. I'm pretty sure that probably has a lot to do with it. So I think that going forward, they're going to try and use this as kind of, let's not this be a harbinger for things to come as far as every pay-per-view that they do that is not a major WWE pay-per-view, because from what I'm hearing, the WWE is trying to market Day One as a new big fifth major pay-per-view. We know about Money in the Bank has been kind of elevated into that major pay-per-view sphere. We know WrestleMania, SummerSlam. We know about the Royal Rumble and Survivor Series. So maybe they want to move Day One into that first major pay-per-view of the year, and this could be what they're looking for.
Well, maybe just in fact, if this is what they're looking for, then I certainly will be looking forward to going ahead and going to that one as the inaugural first. Because of course I'll be in ATL that time. So let's see. Hopefully, if they can actually steer me towards my mind of thinking that I do want to go to this pay-per-view. Although I haven't seen Brock Lesnar in the flesh, this will be the move for sure, peeps. But next, after this one is, of course, Paul Heyman apparently has an emotional hold on Brock Lesnar. Of course, for every single person that probably tuned in to SmackDown this past Friday, emanating from the Staples Center in Los Angeles, California, yes, Tinseltown, you would have noticed that Brock Lesnar, who showed up in overalls, heel persona, not so much, it was certainly a face, flip phone like he was back in 2005, and a smile on his face towards Sami Zayn to the point where he almost took him to Saskatchewan in Canada.
Yes.
But what changed that, you may ask? Well, let's just say Paul Heyman brought back some intuition into thinking that Brock is the beast, which he said, and I quote, about 2 years before this would be a victim that would have a one-way ticket to Suplex City. Was he wrong? No. But, of course, after Paul Heyman would rant about a good 2-3 minutes about how this seemed like he was in a dispensary looking for grade A marijuana, Brock snapped. And he took Sami Zayn to Suplex City and F5'd them a good couple of I mean, Lord have mercy on my soul. Sami Zayn, Peeps, what do you think of this whole thing?
Well, first of all, I think I can still see Sami Zayn's soul floating around in space right now. I mean,
yes.
Ooh, good grief. But my critique of the opening salvo that they did on SmackDown, mind you, you heard me complain about pacing and what they do with this, the way that they time out SmackDown.
Yeah.
With this particular, I'll stay on topic, with this particular opening, what they did to kind of further enhance the whole Sami Zayn salvo, if you will, with Brock and with Paul Heyman. It worked in this sense that it shows that they're evolving Sami's character, is that he's getting a little more brazen, which is something that he normally wouldn't do. Yeah. He's usually a coward, and he manipulates behind the scenes. But he really started to show his peacock feathers, so to speak, with Paul Heyman as he kind of rose out of that wheelchair. But here's the thing that I looked at and said that the segment was a little bit off. And the fact that it seems like they're trying to turn Brock into Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And it seems like the only person that can get the key to turn that Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde is Heyman. And they obviously use that angle because Roman Reigns was not on the show. So let's see where they go from here. I didn't like the segment as much as a lot of other people probably did, because I think that it was 20 minutes that they could have used on some other stuff that would have been more compelling. Not to say that they couldn't have done something compelling with this, but this particular storyline, they kind of stretched it out a little bit too long.
Yes, this could at least about 10 minutes. They could have went ahead and just, scooched all of that up into a good solid 10 minutes, and something could have happened in that span of time. But yes, a good 20 minutes of that. I mean, for God's sakes, we could have had an Aaliyah match at the Staples Center, but
yeah. And I don't want it to make it look like we're being hypocritical in the fact that we know that CM Punk and MJF had that 20-minute promo battle. But the difference was that was actually much more compelling than what we saw yesterday. Although this was not that bad.
It wasn't bad, of course, but it just wasn't, close to heart. Has you saying, ooh, it's the entertainment factor. But we digress.
I don't know if you know, there you go. There's the counter. Remember, went 7 last week. We put one down to I digress. So there we go.
We are starting it already. Oh, man.
Starting already.
Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, from here, I think we're about to get another one because WWE has unveiled the next in line class. They have brought at least 15 individuals straight out from college into the WWE just so that they can be the next in line to go ahead and work as WWE superstars. Peeps, I know there's one coming, so you can take the floor on this one.
Okay. I'm trying to parse my statement so that I can be as concise as possible. Not yelling and screaming and going nuts. But here we go. I'm gonna digress at some point, but let's see what happens.
Yeah.
We have a company, as you heard me say many, many times before, has all of this money, and they're looking to evolve their product. They're trying to get more of a reach, to get younger, to get much better talent, stronger, faster, taller, etc. And they're going into the college ranks to try to get people, because we know that the NCAA has kind of changed their rules now, where a lot of people from college can now make money off of their own names and likenesses, etc. And that also allows some of these younger kids, 18, 19 years old, coming out of college with the WWE, and they'll be able to help promote, etc., etc.
Of course, yeah.
My question is, where is the same attention to the same guys that are in the company that could be the building blocks for their company going forward. They're literally going for cheap labor, meaning kids right out of college to be WWE superstars potentially, make money off of their names, and then who knows what they're going to do next. Meanwhile, you have a lot of guys who were in that company for months and months and years that saw almost no attention on television, almost no attention paid for getting them the pushes that they needed to build newer stars. What you literally done have taken a share of stars that could have been on your roster and shoehold them over to the competition. Now you're going to have these young, new kids come in potentially. And as you talked about last week, the story of WWE potentially starting up Tough Enough. This is literally what this is. So we're going to probably end up seeing these kids come out of college. Maybe they do the Tough Enough thing and do what they do there. And then we're going to see the fight to see the first person get cut by WWE. Certainly. We'll call the show A Cut Below the Rest. How does that sound? But
not bad, peeps.
I digress. I don't know what it is, but this is one of those things that happens. I can't. I don't know where they're going with this. I really don't know.
Don't blame you. I don't blame you. But that's 2 on the marker for I Digresses. We move into the last topic for Fast Track, and that is Long Island cheering for Maxwell Jacob Friedman. Lord Christ have mercy. What have we gone through as a generation? Look at us. We're hideous. Peeps. Before I say anything, floor is yours.
I would have expected nothing less. When they started the show, they talked about, well, he was going to be defending that Battle Royal Diamond Ring. So he was the last person introduced. And they literally gave him a music trailer. The best that I can say is give him a movie trailer and talked about all of these different things. And while that was going on, since I was actually there, the fans lost their minds. And they started laughing at some of the things he did. He got out of his car. He goes into the trunk. He gets his high school football jersey. He puts his scarf on. He does the shush thing, walks off the football field and goes into the building. And he came in like a conquering war hero. Literally, the fans lost their minds. MJF chants. There was a guy behind me that said MJF for president. There were people that were in the stands going crazy and chanting MJF, MJF. And it was interesting the way that happened because CM Punk had started the show earlier. Yeah. And the reason why I find it funny is because MJF's music played at the beginning of the show, and it was CM Punk that came out, and he was booed into the Stone Ages. So the contrast between CM Punk and MJF being MJF is supposed to be the heel, and it's the face, CM Punk, getting booed. That's similar to what happened with Bret Hart when he was in Canada, where he was the heel everywhere else, but he was cheered in Canada. Same thing here. I think that what happened with CM Punk in Chicago, where if he was a heel, the fans would cheer him, but anywhere else he might get booed. So these are the kinds of things that you start to see happening in AEW, and I loved it. I really, really loved it.
And would you care to say if there were any other chants that were said towards Punk or in the opposite?
There was a chant that was started 2 rows behind me when CM Punk started to talk, and they were literally chanting F your pizza.
I heard that on national television.
Aimed at CM Punk from the Chicago style pizza. And literally that engulfed the entire building. It built from behind the section where I was at all the way up to the rafters and around the entire arena. And I don't know how it came across on television. I actually DVR'd it so I could see it. I'll probably see it later on. It was really, really loud.
It's funny you say that, peeps, because as that was going on, before it even happened, I was receiving your text and you said, "Oh, they started a F your pizza chant." And I was like, "What the heck is he talking about?" And once I said that, then I started to hear the chant started to get echoing around, like, the UBS arena. I'm sitting there like, wow. One of my friends who even went, he even said, "Rich, the FU pizza chants are livid, man. Like, you should see this." And the way that they had the camera pan around the ring and stuff like that and zoomed out once the chant started, and I'm just like, wow. Let's just say New York loves MJF. Let's just put it that way.
I love the fans. Just a quick aside to that, the fans that were there. I sent you some pictures. There was a fan dressed up as Macho Man. He called himself the Matcha Man, like in matcha tea, where he was all green with green hair, green hat, and a WWE Championship belt, and was walking around, doing all of this, and
the whole finger in the air, the twirl,
finger in the air, and pointing and going like that. There was another fan. There were fans that were dressed up like Sting. To me, the funniest one, there was a fan that was dressed up as Dusty Rhodes.
The American Dream. The polka dots.
The American Dream. The wig. This fan wore a wig, a polka dot shirt, polka dot shorts, and even had muscle sleeves on to make him look like he got big muscle arms. And fans were chanting Dusty, and he turned around and he did the flip flop and fly with the elbow in midair. It was hilarious. Oh, that was fun.
Fans in cosplay, right? Gotta love them. Gotta love them.
Yes.
But certainly, that's the end to Fast Track. We always like going ahead and doing this. Of course, we will go ahead and see what lies in the world of professional wrestling next week as we go ahead and continue on with Fast Track. But from there, from the world of Fast Track to the new world of actually wrestling topics, we will dive into the major one, and that is NXT War Games review. Now, peeps, of course, we know certainly well that this past week we got to go ahead and enjoy NXT War Games. Of course, it's emanating from NXT 2.0, so it's certainly not the same. But we still got something that you can certainly enjoy. Aside from the women's match and the way that it ended in that fashion, the rest of the card was pretty good. But the one thing I can certainly go ahead and say is that WWE has laid the groundwork for a couple more talents to go ahead and make their mark in this industry. Now, judging from these four, which of course we all know as Braun Breaker, Carmelo Hayes, Grayson Waller, and Tony D'Angelo, these guys went ahead and defeated the old black and gold version of NXT, which consisted of Tommaso Ciampa, Johnny Gargano, LA Knight, and Pete Dunne. Peeps, certainly to say that through it all, even from what I saw on Twitter and Instagram, fans were really mad that these four actually took the W. What do you think of this whole match going in and the way that it ended, and what do you see happening in the future for these four guys?
Well, this also falls back on the old adage that on your way out the door, you put over the younger talent. And I think this is literally the thought process behind the old NXT. I think if you're looking at the guys that are being pushed as the future of this company, brand, whatever, at least half of the four that you see there are going to be really big stars. We know Braun Breaker is definitely going to be that star that they push. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's up in the main roster by the end of the first quarter of next year. We know Carmelo is, without question, one of the best young stars, great athlete, great star, great enthusiasm. I'm liking his promos more and more now. He seems to be getting more confident in his promo style. Tony D'Angelo, I'm sorry, his character is just too much of that old gimmick stereotype that they keep throwing out. Vince always has to have at least one ethnic stereotype wrapped onto a character. He's got to be this Italian guy, so obviously they have to reference, quote unquote, devious things that you stereotype. So it's like, well, let's move on from that. But the message is that it's quote unquote, if this isn't the end of an era, this is certainly the way to usher it out if it hadn't ended already. And I think that's what the message was going forward. I think that at least from this match, they're in good hands in the short term. I don't know about the long term as far as NXT 2.0 goes, but in the short term on NXT 2.0, I think they're in pretty decent hands.
I would say the same thing. But the one thing that caught every single person's attention is number one, the tag team title match between Imperium and, of course, Kyle O'Reilly. And the individual that he certainly went ahead and caught that he was about to get attacked from, put up the UE sign. And then, this was, of course, the aftermath of him having to go ahead and lose. But it's the fact that he really went ahead and teamed up Von Wagner. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, Pete, from there, we already see that this was going to be an appetite for disaster. We knew that there was no chance in him going ahead and having to take the W. But with him having to go ahead and throw up the Undisputed Era sign after losing the match, and then noting later in the pay-per-view itself that he's going to face Von Wagner in a steel cage match on the next NXT, everybody already got the instance that it was over. What did you get from that yourself, Peeps?
You're pretty much on cue with that. And first off, this is one of the things that we've all talked about before, is that they hot-shotted a lot of these angles because they know seemingly a lot of these the wrestlers that are there, that are on the roster, that are of the older veteran type, the ones that have been there 4 or 5 years, the ones that they don't want to continue to push, the ones that they want to give the younger athletes the rub for, they're either on their way out or having a diminished role within either NXT or within the company overall. And I think that when you look at how this happened, they hot-shotted it and made it look like first of all, the match was really good, which was surprising to a lot of people in the fact that most people had an idea about Kyle O'Reilly and whatever his potential contract situation would have been. And we know Vince has been pushing Von Wagner through the roof. As a matter of fact, the first edition of NXT 2.0, they had an NXT championship match. He was in the main event his first night. So that should tell you what Vince and company think of him. And even though Vince is the final say with NXT now, he's more involved, Shawn Michaels and Triple H did have a lot of say as far as helping to develop the guy. So they're seeing something with it. The fans don't seemingly like Von Wagner at all. Not because of he's such a great heel. He's getting like X-Pac type, home heat. So they're going to have to worry about that going forward. But 3 weeks into a tag team and you turn the guy? I mean, that should tell you all you need to know about what the company was thinking going forward.
Yes. So from there, Kyle O'Reilly, we already knew, done deal. But the one that certainly captivated us, had us feel some type of way, was NXT's black and gold prodigal son. The man that was described to every single fan as Johnny Takeover. For a short period of time, Johnny Champion. But the man that certainly was the heart and soul, the Rebel Heart, which, if I can note, they changed his theme song going on the way out back to Rebel Heart. Yes, Johnny Gargano, which was his last match in NXT. Of course, we didn't figure that out until the next night, but during Takeover, there were some parts and segments that you can certainly note that probably signaled the Omega. And that was when he entered into the War Games cage, stood out, looked at the fans, and the camera cut to Tommaso Ciampa, who is certainly in real life one of his best friends, cheering him on. And from there, of course, the end of the match, where he got to go ahead and sit down and talk with the fans. and tell him that he's not fully done yet. He needs to go ahead and explain all of this on Tuesday, which he did, with on the way out having to go ahead and, end with Grayson Waller, just obliterating him with a steel chair for no apparent reason. It was a good send-off, I think I should say, but I don't see what that segment was for. But little than 24 hours later, Fightful, Bleacher Report, and so many other wrestling news sources went ahead and stated that Johnny Gargano is officially a free agent. What is your thought process on what Johnny Gargano left behind, and what do you see for him in the future, peeps?
Well, I know that a lot of wrestling pundits, those that were critical of Johnny Gargano, from the aspect of, I know Jim Cornette, who was one of the people that I listened to a ton of. I've been a Cornette fan for a very long time. He didn't really care much about Johnny Gargano, mostly in the presentation of him, his height, weight, etc., that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I think that the critique, since I don't want to misquote Jim, along the lines of he kind of thinks that Gargano was kind of cosplaying being a wrestler as opposed to actually being a wrestler. And I think that's just a little bit harsh in that sense. I know there are other people that probably thought the same way. I have seen enough from Johnny Gargano over the 5 years or so that he was on the NXT brand, and to see the matches that he had, not only with Tommaso Ciampa as a tag team with DIY, but to see some of the matches at TakeOver, the first Triple Crown winner in NXT history, all of the matches that he's had, the way that faction was kind of hokey, but it worked. He was able to get it to work. But his involvement and his importance to the brand, building as part of that foundation, as we talk about in AEW, they have that 4 pillars of AEW. Gargano was one of those pillars of NXT that you built on top of. And you knew that when you got a match with Johnny Gargano, you were going to get an A-plus match, no matter who his opponent was. Whether you didn't like some of the gimmicky stuff he did, whatever was the case, you always knew, especially around TakeOver time, the same way we all talk about Shawn Michaels being Mr. WrestleMania, Johnny Gargano was always Johnny TakeOver. And he always had special tights, special jacket that he would come to the ring with. And what I liked is in his last match in NXT, his gear was made up of small snippets of every outfit that he's ever worn at every TakeOver. That shows you how important that was to him to be there for that match.
Yes. And I mean, from there, we moved on to Tuesday, where he actually did say goodbye. Bittersweet. We know where this can be going. Certainly, we do not see Johnny Gargano on the Indies. We certainly can't see him on Impact. Not saying that Impact isn't good, but we think we have a fair shot of knowing where this is heading. A man of his caliber, being somewhat the Daniel Bryan of his era in NXT, we certainly can see Johnny Gargano in All Elite Wrestling. Am I wrong, peeps?
That would be a scary match to have Bryan Danielson versus Johnny Gargano. And why I love the concept of having competition, and I alluded to it earlier in the show, that competition breeds different things that step up your game. The competition is going to do everything that they can to make sure that they're better than their competition, and so on and so forth. Now, if Gargano decides to actually go, because I don't believe he has a non-compete clause in his contract with him going. He did not get released. His contract expired. Yeah. So there's a big difference there. So he could decide to show up whenever. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe sometime in January, I think it's January, although I don't think it's going to happen, AEW is going to be in Cleveland. So there is a possibility that we know that Johnny Gargano is from the Cleveland area.
Yes.
If AEW wanted to do something along those lines, and it's kind of stereotypical for and then let him debut in his hometown, which is what AEW has done in the past.
Yeah.
I could see it happening, but I think more importantly for him, as he's talked about before, he's going to be a new dad in February. So I don't know if wrestling right now is what he's thinking of until after that event, which I think is more important. So we'll see what happens and how it shakes out. But the leverage and the cards are really all in his favor right now.
Of course. But if I care to add, although Cleveland is his first home, his second home is Orlando, due to the fact that, NXT has been widely blazed in Full Sail, along with, it being at the Capitol Wrestling Center for a short period of time, and, this warehouse, of course. As reported yesterday, we got the notion that NXT will still be there, but All Elite Wrestling will be bringing their pay-per-view Revolution to Orlando in March. As you just said, Gargano and Candice LeRae are going to be expecting in February. And you said that he may not be worried about that as of now. What are the odds, you may see, peeps, of having Johnny appear at Revolution?
Well, AEW does like to have a surprise. I don't know how it can be a surprise if you know one is coming, but I digress.
Third one.
That's number 3. I think if we're being honest here, I think that most people think that he's going to go to AEW at some point, whether it's now or with it in the next 3 or 4 months. If it's on Dynamite, if it's at the pay-per-view, that would be even better. That would probably work. And he doesn't have to change his name to something else because, that's his name. Exactly. Can't trademark a person's name if you don't get them the right to. So if you want to do that, that definitely could work. The issue then becomes now, and we'll probably talk about this more as the weeks go along. At some point, AEW has a huge roster. The same way that we talked about WWE having to do all of these cuts, like 80 wrestlers in the calendar year, at some point we know some of these guys in AEW, they're going to eventually either through attrition by contract expiring or through being released. We know Big Swole was cut from or asked for her release from AEW. You're going to have the kind of exodus to some degree. What happens then? That's what I think we'll find out.
Well, we'll just have to wait in due time. But certainly, I guess War Games was probably just the turning point of something, good in the near future. Of course, there were pretty much a lot of heartbreaks through a lot of these matches. But I guess you can say it's bittersweet because it turns the tide. Sooner or later, we're going to go ahead and get to see something new in the form of maybe new stars. Different promotions having to go ahead and get new acquisitions. It all depends, but certainly we'll just have to go ahead and wait and see. It's with that we go ahead and end the first topic today on Saturday afternoon's main event. Stay tuned because in the next couple of minutes after the 30-second mark, we will go ahead and view, of course, the questions that these fans have perfectly went ahead and graced to us. And from there, we will also get to go ahead and see into the topic of, is it the end of the road for none other than Jeff Hardy? Stay tuned because the second part of episode 14 of Saturday afternoon's main event is coming up. Of course, we said that we have the questions here from you fans today on Saturday afternoon's main event. So without further ado, peeps, I know you like this part of the show, so let's get into it. The first one of the day coming from Tua is a GOAT 13, and he says, above all other weeks, this has to be the saddest week in professional wrestling / sports entertainment. Peeps, do you agree with him?
I wouldn't definitely say the saddest. I'd say it's been a more emotional week, but I'll put things into perspective. The Chris Benoit stuff that happened back in 2007, Eddie Guerrero's passing, a lot of other things that happened, Owen Hart happening. I can say that although I understand the sentiment to the idea that it's the saddest, I wouldn't say that. It's been one of those sad instances. We also had a passing of Blackjack Lanza, who passed away just a couple of days ago. So I can say it is a very sad week. And my condolences to the family, and knowing Blackjack Lanza as far as what he brought to the wrestling world, I can honestly say that even though there are ups and downs and we know about the things that happen, including stories that we'll probably talk about a little later on in the show, basically we know that we have to temper it a little bit with just a little bit of perspective. So I get where you're coming from, and I can agree that it has been a really not a great week in pro wrestling / sports entertainment, but I will say that it's not up there in the top as far as other weeks in the world of wrestling.
Yes, I can certainly agree with you that, Pete. So, to a good question.
Great question.
Next one comes from Tombstone City Adam, and he says, I don't understand why people hate NXT 2.0 coming out on top. Wasn't SummerSlam 2010 an example of bad booking already? You're not wrong. Just to go ahead and say about that, yes, I mean, having Team WWE come out on top over Nexus, it's funny that he says that because I was just talking to Mr. Triple C the other day about this too, and I mean, I can certainly vouch for this. I love that NXT 2.0 came out on top. I love to see what these younger guys can go ahead and do in the world of professional wrestling, or should I say sports entertainment. It's Vince's world, I'm sorry, but I digress. That's the fourth one. Write it down, peeps. But yeah, certainly NXT 2.0 coming out on top is great. I certainly couldn't agree with you. Let the people hate. If so, let it be. I myself, in this sense, I'm okay with it. I'm certainly okay with it. It's always good to go ahead and have the new guys go ahead and get their fair chance of superstardom and see where they can go ahead and skyrocket. And what is the ceiling for them? The ceiling for these guys, I can certainly say, is bountiful, because Vince can certainly make a start if he wants to. We'll just have to wait and see how this goes and how this pans out.
There's the operative words you just said. If he wants to. That's the problem. Yes. We don't know where Vince is going to go from there. So if that is the case, we'll see what happens going forward.
Exactly right. Tombstone City Adam, like the question. Last one comes from In Tunny We Trust. We missed you, buddy. He says, I feel that the Pinnacle could have been equal to the Horsemen, but seems like that won't ever reign true. Wow. He's not wrong, peeps. What do you think?
There's always potential when you have a faction that has as many talented wrestlers that are there. But let's really call it the way it is. There are very few factions, and this is where I will die on this hill. There are very few factions that were created not as a marketing tool, not as something that the company came up with, but something that was there, that was sparked by need in some degrees, but also just out of happenstance of having four friends that were pushed into something that created a faction that carried a company. Do I think that the Pinnacle was going to be a faction that could carry AEW? I don't think so. And the reason why I say that is because AEW has too many factions to begin with. Between the Elite, and then the Super Elite, and then the Pinnacle, and then the Inner Circle, and then the Dark Order, there are too many factions. Now, there's nothing wrong with having tag teams out of certain factions to create team structure and having contenders go after championships. But after a while, when you have too many factions, it gets very hard to kind of figure out the hierarchy involved.
Yeah.
Which faction is higher at the gate? Which one is the mid-card faction? Who's getting into the feud with who? Who's having the problem with whatever faction? And then when you have factions within the faction, it's almost like rolling the dice and trying to figure out, I'll pluck this guy from that faction and we'll make a team and see where they go. So I think that the Pinnacle could have been a pretty hot one. I'll go on record in saying this. I even think that the Dangerous Alliance is much better than what the Pinnacle could have been. Wow. And I really enjoyed the Dangerous Alliance. And I'm going back to 1992. So that should tell you something.
Of course. Well, Tony, we trust. I guess we can certainly agree with your question.
I did like the question, though. That's definitely like the question.
Yes, the question was really good. Got us to go ahead and, didn't say much digresses, but I mean, it is what it is. But certainly, guys, that's the end for the questions. As I always say, look down there. It's right there. You see, peeps can even point down there to it for you too. At Saturday Afternoons _main event. Type in your question, send it to us through DMs, and of course, certainly, we guarantee that it will be on the next show. Come on, guys. Not that hard. We enjoy them. You enjoy them. It's one of those good segments out of Saturday Afternoons main event. Once more, right down there at Saturday Afternoons _main event. From there, peeps. It's funny because you can certainly hear the music in the background. It's from what Tua said, sad, week. Not so much, compared to what has happened in the past, but it was pretty much, a crazy week in senses of, having to go ahead and look through people leaving, others, having to go ahead and enter other instances. This one, of course, was probably one of those. And what I'm talking about is the climactic end to a career at World Wrestling Entertainment once more, and that is Jeff Hardy, the enigma that is, Jeff Hardy. This past week, of course, I was sitting down, just ending a final, in college, and passed it, entered into my car on the way back home, and, I was doing one of those things that is against the law, so I guess you can say that, Officer Arrest the Phenomenal One, he was violating codes and, looking at his phone while driving, but it was because Twitter went ahead and put out that from Fightful, Sean Sapp, who was, of course, one of those lead reporters, had heard that Jeff Hardy had been released by WWE. What I began to ask myself was, why? Is it because he wasn't booked in the right way? What caused this to happen? Is it because of those past interviews? Instantly, I took a picture and I sent it to Mr. Triple C, and I also sent it to Peeps Nate. Mr. Triple C went ahead and answered me by saying, Peeps sent the same thing to me. And once he sent that, Peeps went ahead and sent me the message saying, I was just about to send you this. Looks like we were both thinking at the same time just to go ahead and send this news through since it was so big. But the thing that we had to learn hours later was that the reason behind Jeff being released was because he declined rehab. Now, this isn't the first time. We've seen from many instances where Jeff had been released by WWE because of substance abuse and declining rehab. TNA, he did go to TNA for a long time. During the Eric Bischoff era, we did see him having to get pinned at Victory Road because of being under the influence during a match and having Sting end off, a good minute of the match starting. I guess all of that just ties into what this is now, but through all of this, we all expected that, Jeff was, certainly, out of this, fought his demons, and this was certainly over with. We wouldn't have to see this side of Jeff again. But unfortunately, it's back. We saw from Matt Hardy tweeting out that, my brother's fine, his family's fine, he's okay, no need to worry, and his wife said the same thing in a tweet. But of course, the wrestling world is still, heartbroken and shaken off of this because Jeff Hardy is one of those that stands for every person in professional wrestling, every fan, just by being an enigma, being somebody that's completely different, one that stands out from the crowd, one that, just does whatever because he believes in himself and is confident in what he can do off of his own ability. And that is why he is loved by so many. Certainly hearing this, it wasn't some of the best news. Peeps, what did you take from this?
Well, to give a little bit of context to this, and this is one of the things that I've always hated about any wrestler that has had substance abuse problems or any kind of problems, and then they stay in a company, especially in the WWE. Vince likes to do this a lot. He wants to build sympathy, especially for a face. Use anything that has happened to them in their real life and then use it in storyline wise to get that sympathy so that the fans will cheer for them. The last really big time that this happened was, if you remember, they did this with Road Warrior Hawk and his drinking problem. He had a bad alcohol problem. He had a bad drug problem. And they used that to kind of break the Legion of Doom up when they threw in Droz, who was part of this. And as you recall, Hawk climbing up the Titantron and then kayfabe falling off of it, and everybody thought, oh man, maybe something really bad happened to it. And now we fast forward to Jeff Hardy. The reason why I bring that up as a kind of like a backdrop for this whole story is that we know of Jeff Hardy's substance abuse problems. We've seen it used in storyline before. If you remember
Sheamus, yep.
The Sheamus, the CM Punk feud that he had, where they did a storyline where he was supposedly found unresponsive on the staircase of a hotel, which we knew was storyline based, but came across as real based on what happened to him in the past. You referenced the Sheamus stuff, where they did a urine test in the ring, even though it wasn't real urine, but the fact that I'm even saying urine is another story, but hey, it is what it is. I'm going to keep moving past that part.
Yes, they even did it with his brother during 2009, 2010, around that time, during their feud leading up to WrestleMania 25.
Yes.
All of that, of course,
Yeah.
So
now, what happened that got us to this point was a house show that happened, and it was, I believe, a 6-man tag team match.
Yes.
And it was, I believe, Jeff Hardy, Drew McIntyre, and I'm trying to remember who his partner was.
Orton.
And Randy Orton. And there was a spot in the match where Jeff Hardy, after getting the hot tag, after he looked kind of a little bit off, he looked like he was a little dizzy, maybe not as put together as he normally would in a match. It wasn't as sharp. He tagged out, and after the tag, he rolled out of the ring, went into the crowd, and went into the locker room, and never came back. And the fans were wondering, obviously because of what happened, because he tagged in Drew McIntyre, and Drew started to have his comeback, and it was against the Usos and Roman Reigns. And as that match was going on, since everything was going on in the ring, he just decided to go into the crowd, and he went, security escorted him back, and he never came back. Match is over. Drew McIntyre, after they're celebrating, grabbed the mic and said, can somebody get Jeff Hardy to have him, come back to the ring and we can celebrate it? I haven't seen him. And that was literally it. That was the main event of the house show.
Yep.
2 days later or a day later is when we started to hear about, well, something happened. He was sent home. There was supposed to be another house show. They told him to stay home. Now we know what happened within that 48-hour time frame where they offered him rehab because of what was going on, and he refused it. And WWE decided to move on. It's really, really sad, but let's really be honest. Jeff Hardy is, 43? Almost 44? His body is beat up. He walks around like Mick Foley. And I look at him, and the only thing that I can think of is that he needs help. Most people that have substance abuse problems and addictions and demons, they never are cured of it. This is something that goes on for life. It's a matter of how you manage it. If you fall off the wagon, getting the help you deserve. Because remember, Jeff Hardy's married. Jeff Hardy has kids now. He wants to be there for his family. And if you remember, I brought up an instance that happened during the Survivor Series that Jeff Hardy had an interview with somebody. I believe it was I can't remember the interviewer, but did an interview and brought up a tweet that Matt Hardy gave him that he hadn't known about. Talked about, "I'm proud of you, I love you, you look great," etc. And when I first heard this story, I was under the impression, well, maybe he just doesn't want to be in WWE. He misses his brother. He really misses being part of the Hardys. It's obviously maybe a combination of that and some other bigger issues that we can't even really fully speculate on. So I keep my fingers crossed and hoping that he can get the help that he needs. He's given the privacy that he needs. And right now, wrestling is probably not his number one priority right now. Sobriety is, if that is indeed what the issue is. And I hate to see this going on with him right now.
Of course. With me, I feel as if that, as you said, just a couple of seconds ago, body's, taking a toll. He's been in this business for, more than a good 20 plus years. I certainly believe that, he can certainly just end it now. And it's not on the case of saying, oh, he can't go anymore. He can't do. Of course, we've seen in the past how many times Jeff Hardy has done death-defying moves off the top of Mount Everest, for God's sakes. Jeff has certainly made his case for being one of those great professional wrestlers. He was good at what he was doing. We all know this. It wasn't hard. And he has been a past major champion. I certainly believe that there's nothing else that Jeff needs to prove to us. The one thing that's left off his bucket list for him to prove to us is to just go ahead and hang it up and just, at least keep sobriety. That's all we can hopefully, hope and pray for at this certain point in time. If it is the end and this signal that he is no longer going to be wrestling, then it's sad to go out that way. But the only thing I can certainly care about right now is not about him having to go and join another promotion to prove himself, or we continue to badmouth him, or whatever the case may be. Whatever is going on in the world, in the world of pro wrestling and sports entertainment that refers to Jeff Hardy, the one thing that I'm looking forward to hearing is that Jeff is doing okay. That's all. That's all I can certainly care about at this certain point in time.
That's the only championship I want to see him wear around his waist is his sobriety. That's the only thing that matters right now. Because, like I said before, he has a family. He's married. He has children. I think going forward, and this is something, as I've said before, unless the wrestler themselves want storylines used in as far as their personal demons, it should be off limits. And we've seen Vince McMahon use that a lot in Jeff Hardy and his style of how they've tried to get the fans on him to be part of him, to root for him. You don't need to highlight that. I think everybody knows that. It's a matter of what is going to happen with him going forward. And I think that now, even if Matt took time away from wrestling to be by his brother's side, to whatever is going on, because as I said, we can only speculate, and I don't like to do that. But going forward, if his brother is in his corner and he's got family and everybody else, we saw a tweet that his wife put up that was then promptly removed, saying he's here, he's good, etc. We won't know unless it's allowed for us to know, and that can only come from Jeff.
Exactly. But from there, all we can certainly go ahead and do as fans is just wish him the best. Jeff, certainly every single person is rooting for you at this certain point in time.
Yes.
As Peeps just said, the only championship that we certainly do care about right now is your sobriety. Just, hopefully just to go ahead and get well and just be rejuvenated and, certainly see those demons being fought off and being put to an end. That is all we can certainly hope for. But it is from there that we certainly, as like, co-host and host of, Saturday afternoon's main event, if there's anything that you certainly go ahead and go through, whether it be demons or, it's personal addictions, whatever it may be, if you feel as if it is something that is being abused and something that you can't get a hold of, certainly just get the help. It certainly can be offered to you, whether if you don't want to go to somebody or some stranger, whether it be a hotline or the addiction hotline, which is 1-800-662-4357. If you don't feel good with going ahead and doing that, certainly you have friends, you have family members that you can go to that can certainly help you go ahead and get through a certain obstacle that you may be facing. But certainly, don't be down on yourself because you're going through this. It is just a teeny little obstacle. It's just a microscopic obstacle. There is certainly a chance for you to go ahead and overcome it and to do greater things. So once more, we just encourage you, if you are going through something at this certain point of time of listening, certainly get the help. That's all we can go ahead and wish for. But from there, we certainly can say that this is the end to Saturday afternoon's main event, episode 14. We thank you, the listeners, for going ahead and tuning in today. We certainly can't go ahead and wish for anything more because we thank you guys for going ahead and tuning in. We thank you for going ahead and giving this outpour of support. Certainly, it is great and my pleasure and Peep's pleasure to go ahead and say thank you.
Yes.
Certainly, we appreciate it every single time you guys tune in. The comments, the questions, the amount of outpour of feedback, all of that just ties into knowing that we're doing a great job, and we thank you for going ahead and being there for every step of the way. Stay tuned for episode 15, which will be next week. From me, Peeps and H, we certainly say that go ahead, send through questions. Go ahead and peep through and just look at the updates off the Instagram and Twitter. But from all of that, we just continue to say thank you. And it's with that on this episode of Saturday Afternoon's Main Event that I, the phenomenal one,
and I, the Peeps and H, we came,
we saw,
and in the words of Paul Heyman,
we conquered.
We conquered.
Yes, certainly. See you next week for episode 15. The phenomenal one and Peeps and H right there. We sign off. Peace, love, farewell.